So melodic minor harmony is something that often has a bit of mystique about it, but what if I was to tell you that basically it's about one note? Okay, so I'm going to make my argument based around 3 basic chord sounds that you like to come across all the time in jazz: minor, dominant, and half diminished. Okay, and these are the most common places. There's one other one which we'll talk about a little bit later, but these are the 3 most common uses that you'll come across of so-called melodic minor harmony. Okay, and we're going to just go through the modes and just compare the standard mode you would use if you were just using major scale modes with the melodic minor, and in each case there's 1 note different. Let's start with the minor. So for a minor 1 chord or 4 chord in a minor key, or 2 or 6 in a major key, we would typically use a Dorian mode. Typically this chord is normally played over a minor 7th as well, usually on 2, okay, or 4 in a minor key. So it's got a flat 7 as well. But if we raise that flat 7 up to a natural 7th, we have the melodic minor. And actually these scales are often combined, and you often hear that in classic jazz lines. The melodic minor and the Dorian are kind of interweaved. Okay, so it's 1 note. So if we're thinking about this scale harmonically, we'll be leaning on that note, the C sharp, because it is the note of difference and it's the color tone. So if we go, that's the 1, 1, 7. There you go. Yeah, yeah. There you go, the melodic minor. That's that sound, right? A good example would be, I'm going to transpose it into this key, but the first bit from Chelsea Bridge by Billy Strayhorn. Oh, it's a Dorian. Oh, now we're leaning on the C sharp. And now we're going up to the D minor, right? Yeah. So that C sharp is so colourful in that tune, Chelsea Bridge by Billy Strayhorn. Do check it out. Billy Strayhorn is kind of the father of this stuff. You know, he kind of almost invented it. And that creates a really vivid colour against the minor chord. Okay? Let's move on. Okay, so G7. Right, what typical scale would we use against G7? We would use the so-called Mixolydian mode, or the dominant, if you prefer to call it that. I prefer the name dominant. I think Mixolydian doesn't make any sense. I know it's all ancient Greek or something, but I think dominant scale going on dominant chord is easier to understand than Mixolydian, especially as the melodic minor mode that we would most commonly use on this kind of a chord, you know, a G13 or a G9 or something, would be the Lydian dominant, which is a dominant but Lydian. Okay, so we take the dominant scale and we raise the 4th. Now this is cool because it gives us this, again, note C sharp against that chord, and it gives us that sort of 7 sharp 11 sound. It's 1 note different, the C sharp. Yeah. So therefore, if you learn to sing that note, C sharp blah, against that chord, then you'll have got the sound in your ears of the entire melodic minor mode, whatever that means. Okay, so if I go to D7, it's harder. One way I would kind of learn to, until I was absolutely certain of where the note is, the way I would learn to sing this is so I'd sing a 5th. So, which I always remember by Also Sprach Zarathustra, because I'm a nerd, from 2001. Yeah, ba, yeah, that's the 4th. Yeah, there you see. Okay, the D7 sharp 11th sound. It could also be a flat 5, but in this context it's sharp 11th. Now, also the Simpsons. The Simpsons, you know, obviously is another classic way to find it. But really, you just want to find that note. Yeah, yeah, it's in Take the A Train, another Billy Strayhorn tune. Boom, 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 boom. It's there, right? G sharp. So that's an early use of that chord. Sharp 11th. Yeah. It's not necessarily just melodic minor. You could think of it as a whole tone, but that's kind of a sidebar. The thing is, I don't think it makes even any sense to think of that as a melodic minor note. It's just a colour. And the melodic minor mode is just a... scale that includes that colour, right? That's the way I think of it anyway. So moving on, Locrian, which goes on B minor 7 flat 5. Again, it's our friend C sharp again. We raise the ninth. We could have a Locrian sharp 2 or sharp 9 scale. So instead of doing this, we have this. Yeah, and that kind of adds a little bit of intrigue to that one as well. So again, it's like, you know, knowing how to sing this over the top. I go down 1 from the 3rd to the 2nd. Yeah. So E minor 7 flat 5, just to, you know, stretch us a little bit. Bar is the 3rd, down 1 is the E major 2nd, or the major 9th. Okay, that's a good way to kind of learn how to hear that, right? Now, the elephant in the room is something called the altered scale, which is different for this reason. Okay, so in the major scale, there's only one mode which relates to the dominant chord, and that is, of course, the Mixolydian or dominant scale. However, in the melodic minor, there's actually 3. There's our friend the Lydian dominant. There's also the Mixolydian flat 13 or flat 6, and there's also this thing called the altered scale. Okay, now the altered scale doesn't correspond to a major key mode, really, at least not in the way we use it. The way that it really relates is through something called the tritone substitution. So that's when we take something like a G7 chord and then we replace it with a another dominant chord, a flat 5 or a tritone higher. So in this case D flat 7, right? Again, the Simpsons. Okay, so we got that, the D7, and then we run a Mixolydian mode on top of that. And that can function in the same way as the G Mixolydian, right? Now, the thing is that from the point of view of vertical harmony, jazz theoreticians don't like that because the D flat Mixolydian scale has its troublesome F sharp or G flat, and a G flat really, if you're thinking about it as D flat, G flat. So that note is a major 7th on top of the G7. That's actually fine as it resolves, and you can actually hear jazz musicians using it in that way. But if we're thinking about it in terms of like harmony, that note is problematic. So maybe we want to think about raising that one up by a half step, and of course that note corresponds to the 4th of the D flat 7. So actually our changed note is actually the root of the altered scale, which is a bit different. So if you didn't follow any of that, the easiest way to deal with the altered scale is just to treat it as if it's a tritone substitution and use the Lydian dominant. So in this case, we're going to use D flat Lydian dominant, and that'll be our version of the altered scale, right? Now, there's other ways of dealing with it, and I do think the altered scale is a little bit unusual. It doesn't follow the same kind of construction in terms of being an extended chord either. But I'm just going to pretend that's not important right now and focus on how we can start to use these extra notes. So, yeah, being able to hear those notes and then also being able to play them. So for instance, if we want to really get into these sounds as quickly as possible, one nice way of doing it is simply to have an augmented triad on that note, and this is old school magic, right? Check this out. So augmented triads are cool because they are symmetrical. So I can take this chord and I can just basically move it up a major 3rd, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets, or depending how you count, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Should be that. And then it's basically always the same shape. And let's face it, things that stay the same shape on the guitar are nice. We like those. So for any of these extra notes, so for instance on D minor, we've got the C sharp. I can put an augmented triad there. I can use that as a voicing as well. You get a D minor major 7th in that case. Lovely. Do the same thing for the G7. So I notice this one. Again, it's C sharp. It's a nice voicing for a G7 sharp type sound. Do the same thing for the half diminished chord. And then we go like that, lovely. Okay. And then for the altered chord, we take our D flat 7, so we go G7 to D flat 7, and we do the same thing. There's a sharp 11th, there's our altered chord. If you go back to the original, we get this G, if you've added the 7th as well, you get this G 7 flat 13 sound, right? Okay, so that's all good and nice and easy, hopefully. And you can also add your color note to the basic triad. So for D minor, that's a really useful sound. It's the G major arpeggio and added sharp 4 over the G7, but you can use it in all sorts of places. And then for this, I'd probably tend to use the D minor, the B in the bass, which is D minor with B in the basses, as we know, B minor 7 flat 5, because B minor 7 flat 5 ain't a thing, as discussed before. Okay, so that relationship, no kidding, between the B minor 7 flat 5 and the D minor is one of the most useful things you can know. A couple of other things that I really like. You'll notice that by doing this, we have a little thing which I called the Diminished Tetrachord. It's a fancy name, isn't it? So it's basically half step, whole step, half step. So D minor, G7 over here, and then on it's the same thing, B minor 7 flat 5 as well. Now if I change it to D flat 7, we have this, which is very common. You hear that a lot. That's our diminished tetrachord. It's going sharp 11th 5, 13, flat 7 in that context, and it's on D flat 7. Put it over G7, then resolve it to C major 7th, and you've got a bebop line, right? These things are really common. I'll do a few different keys. So this is, it's the same key with a different position. B minor 7 flat 5. Let's use E minor 7 flat 5. Okay. Now, of course, you can also change your scales as well. So I've got a D minor scale going on here, just by changing one note. You know, down here too. It's really nice, you know, you just think about that one note and then it adds colour to what you're doing. And then lastly, you can also use triads, and this is where it gets a little bit more modern. So for instance, on the minor, if I take the triad, and this is going to be a major triad, and a third is going to be our colour note. So it's going to be C sharp, it's going to be A minor, A major on D, A major on G7. Move between that and the augmented. Okay. Almost becomes a sus chord. Who would have thought that? You know, playing a sus chord instead of a a minor 7 flat 5. Not a substitution that would have occurred to me. Okay, and then my favourite, which is to play the D flat triad over the G major, the G7 chord, and then you've got the option of doing that with a E flat major, because the E flat major, the third of that is the same as the sharp 11th of the D flat 7, or if you prefer, the 1 of G7. Right. Okay, so hopefully if you've not done any stuff with melodic minor harmony, that will open up some doors and hopefully make it all seem a bit less intimidating. Thanks for watching. I think that's all right.